between the music selection and the visuals that we used and the emotional connection. Really wanted that summer message to really hit home. So maybe we can play both of those, and then I'll talk about fall.
There's something for everyone in New York State. Because some of the best experiences in New York also happen to be some of the best experiences in the world. Plan your New York State summer vacation at iloveny.com/summer. There's something.
It's time for an unforgettable New York summer.
It's a summertime thing. It's a summertime thing. Summertime thing. It's a summertime thing.
Find your summertime thing in New York. Plan it all at iloveny.com/summer. It's time.
Ran in state, and the drive markets was a much smaller weight, but we figured that's still a relevant message because you live in New York doesn't mean you don't want to visit New York City or see our biggest attractions. So it was still more focused on the regional attractions that give that summer feel, but the best of ran in a smaller weight. And then obviously for the long distance markets, we only ran the best of. And then for fall started with about 2 weeks ago now, a week and a half ago, about a week and a half ago. So hopefully you've seen that. It started to run.
Actually, a week. Yeah, that's like last Thursday, right?
Technically, it's this Thursday. It started fall, but
I was
it's
gonna
good
say,
that you always start ahead.
Right. Well, whenever we're going to do shoots, people say, "Oh, you're shooting. When am I going to see it next year?" Why? Well, we have to shoot in the summer so you can see it next summer. If we're running it in summer, it's too late. So we try to be a little bit in advance of the seasons. But yeah, a week ago feels like a month ago in our world, but these have been running for about a week plus now. So hopefully you've seen them. Again, this is just focusing on the in-state market and the drive markets, and we've used a variety of New York State locations that try to hit on all the hit the attractions that run the gamut of fall opportunities. So foliage, the corn mazes and farms, haunted hay rides, things like that. So we play it.
This is fall in New York State. This is like nowhere else. Plan your getaway at iloveny.com.
So like I said, this started about a week and a half ago. It runs about 4+ weeks. And obviously this runs along with our favorite promotion, our foliage report. Ross will cover that in some of his future reports, but that hand in hand with our fall spots really make fall one of our favorite seasons.
Great. And I want to thank and congratulate Rich for, as he was talking about, of getting things done earlier and shot earlier. We've actually been trying to do that for a number of years. We finally achieved it, that we're actually going out there to shoot things in advance of the season. And I think that serves us really well because we know people don't make their travel decisions just when the first of the season arrive, but in fact, ahead of that. So
it's like seeing Christmas decorations up in August.
Right.
You got to plan ahead.
Hopefully not that far, but yeah. So another busy activity over the summer was our experiential marketing, actually getting out and greeting consumers where they are to let them know about the great opportunities in New York State. And those efforts were headed up, of course, by Shanique Costin, who heads up our experiential marketing.
Yeah, busy was certainly an understatement for us. We were very happy to be back. Of course, having been dark for a year and a half. And so we went from 0 to 4 programs. And so we had a very busy summer. We had our I Love New York mobile tour.
I have to say though, while we're running business events at the same time.
Yes,
so just
well,
to
it's
show
also the busy season for business
how
events.
flexible you and the team are.
Our I Love New York mobile tour, a New York State Fair, activation. We had a pop-up activation at Saratoga Race Course, and I'd be remiss without mentioning our Pride Tour. We engaged with somewhere between 20 and 25,000 travelers over the summer, collecting somewhere about 15,000 emails for our database. All of our programs wrapped a week ago, 2 weeks ago with Labor Day. And so we are still doing a lot of the digesting on the lessons learned, but I have some top lines to share with you guys today. So for our mobile tour, we were excited to be back. As I mentioned last meeting, we only went out with one tour this year. We usually had two, but we did expand the footprint dramatically. So we went from a pod, which was a contained mobile vehicle, to a 40 by 40 activation. It says 30 by 30, but we actually spread out quite a bit more. From this one program, we collected about 11,000 unique leads. This year, we started to both track countries of some of our visitors as well as zip codes. And so we had on average, about 4 countries, which includes the US, so 3 additional countries were present, as well as nearly 40 zip codes. Highlights, the mobile tour specifically this year was a cross-department collaboration. Given the size and scale of it, it could not have been done without our partners across the marketing team. So that's everything from tourism to digital and social to our video services and PR team. I'm dubbing it our most impressive mobile tour ever. We can debate it later.
I'll second that.
If you do say so.
Yeah, it was quite an undertaking with quite a bit of content within this space. And so getting that right is quite an undertaking for everyone, but it came about and it was beautifully done. Staffing matters. So I know we've talked about in the past kind of what we're seeing across the board from a staffing perspective, but hiring brand ambassadors who work our space, particularly for the tour, we hire 5 who go on the entire tour, which is about 12 stops, but it's equivalent to maybe about 16 or so weeks. Hiring them and getting them right is crucial to our footprint. And so they can pretty much make or break an experience for us in a lot of cases. I'm happy to say that we were able to get 4 of our 5 Rockstar BAs from the 2019 tour back, which was great. So they had already been knee deep in New York State and all the things that we offer. And so getting them back on the tour to just refresh and getting to know more about it certainly makes a difference for us. But the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic is still felt through the industry. The cost of raw materials are out the roof. You can never guess kind of where they're going to be at any given point in addition to gas. So putting this thing on is not a small feat, so to speak, and lots of kind of surprises. So we were super happy to essentially accomplish getting to 12 locations this year. And then we also trialed a few things this mobile tour. So in addition to going to fair and festival type activations that already have a crowd, we also included high traffic areas like our welcome centers and beaches and parks. And what we found out is that while we didn't see as much traffic as we would have liked in those locations, we did find that the conversations with travelers in those locations went very deep, right? They were already kind of in the midst of a travel mindset. And so they were willing to talk with us about itineraries and about specific locations, but it was fewer in number. So here are just the next slide, Sarah. Just an overview of the footprint again and the different touch points. So this is what a 40 by 40 activation looks like. It included an AR table, which we called our virtual New York State, as well as 2 kiosks, which held our map app and insider tips. It also included a New York State, the I Love New York sculpture, a 360 GIF activation, as well as our prize wheel. Most of this was gated. Actually, everything in here was gated, and I'll talk about gated versus ungated in a few slides. But it's important to note that we did kind of learn from things being gated and made some assessments and some changes later on. And here are just a few snapshots of us in action. I will say some of the highlights. We had both Governor Hochul, Mayor Adams, both stopped by, as well as some other chamber folks. At some of our stops, actually, Governor Hochul stopped at our first stop, which was the 116th Street Festival in Harlem, which was great. And then our next program was the New York State Fair. So the State Fair actually sits as our last activation stop on our mobile tour. The reason why we pull it out is because this audience is so unique, and it is a 2-week stay where we're normally somewhere for 2 to 3 days on average. We made some changes to the footprint, specifically for fairgoers. And so here, again, spreading out 40 by 40, probably actually stretching more to 50 by 50 in this space. We were there for 13 days, activating about 8 hours a day. In this space, we collected about 6,000 unique emails. On average, we were seeing about one person, one fairgoer who was not from the US on a day average, and collecting about 23 unique zip codes a day. The highlights here were, again, offering gated and ungated experiences. So gated experiences for us are experiences that require you to submit your email in order to interact or continue the activation. While that has certainly been beneficial for I Love New York and getting our hands, getting those emails allow us to continue a conversation through our digital channels, we wanted to make sure that we weren't completely ignoring, right? And understanding that folks want to interact with you at different levels, right? Some people are what we call waiters and swimmers, people who just walk the perimeter and kind of say hi, but think about retail. You go into a store, you want to look around, but you don't want anyone to say anything to you. And there are people who want to engage, you know exactly what you're looking for, and you need help getting directly to it. And so we wanted to take a similar approach. So we ungated several of our activations within the State Fair footprint. One of them being completely unique to our summer activations, which was an RFID table. So essentially connecting, like using a puck of sorts, you connect it to a table, and then video and or content comes alive in it. It allowed consumers or fairgoers to get to know New York State, again, without feeling like they have to give us their emails. And in ways, it's hard to measure the impact of that, but we know, right, that folks are still learning and engaging around New York State, our attractions and destinations in a really great way. And then we also streamlined our email collection system. So from last meeting, you may remember, I mentioned that prior to this year, when you came to an experiential activation, you would have to put your email into each individual zone. This year, we streamlined that, making it so that a consumer only had to put it in once. But this time, we also, for the fair specifically, removed a verification step that somehow was a little bit cumbersome for attendees. And then ideally, we were at the, back in the Expo Center, which is, I believe, still the newest building on the fairgrounds space. It is a very large space. And so we shared that space with the 174th Attack Wing. Ask me about it later. It's a little weird. They had a drone, a fighter drone, and they were showing the coordinates on the screen. It was a little, it's a little bizarre. But being back inside of the Expo Center was awesome. It's near the Family Pavilion, it's central, it's indoor, and has AC. And so it makes for a perfect spot for folks to gather when they're at the State Fair and just looking for some indoor space. Here is a overview of the footprint itself. So again, the RFID tables, the AR table did come back with us, as well as a kiosk. Instead of a 360 stick gift station, we did a comic gift station. And as always, we always bring back the I Love New York sculpture. It's so popular and folks love it. A few snapshots of this footprint in action. And we were lucky enough to have Hope Knight join us here from ESD. And then The last of the activations I'll talk about is our Saratoga Racecourse activation. So this actually came about as a unique opportunity from Ag and Markets. So we work with them on a lot of stuff, including our Welcome Center program, and they have a pavilion at the Saratoga Racecourse, I think for several years now. And within that pavilion, they invite some of their food vendors to come and sample food. Well, within that space, they actually had more opportunity to host a bigger footprint, and they asked us to join them. It was a wonderful opportunity to do a pop-up. We had 3 weeks to get it together, to make the most of the opportunity. And it actually went off well. We learned a lot about the attendee group here. We did 2 activations, 2 unique activations, a photo activation, as well as a getting to know New York State's sports and gaming. And this is one of the first times, I think it's the first time that we have organized content around interest category and not region. And so it was way more relevant for folks who were there. We got to talk about other racetracks, other sporting related facilities across the state, bring those people in, as well as on Travers Day, which is their largest attended day. I think their attendance jumps from about 25,000 to about 50,000 on that day. We changed our far footprint over into a tasting wall. So we actually had a taste of New York as well, where we highlighted 4 food items across the state: cheese curds, maple candies, apples, and half moon cookies. Again, you could just come up, let us know what taste was of your interest, and you could participate as well. I think for us, the highlights and learnings here was around interest categories versus regions. Another cross-department and agency collaboration. The location is important. And so while we were given this space, we also had the opportunity to kind of scout out the race course for future activations. And it's actually a really great, perfect spot for a larger integration here. And if we return, we'd probably look for more sponsorship to help drive attendees to the footprint. I would be remiss without saying a huge thank you to my team, who I believe is both on the phone and in the room. The folks on the phone have helped manage several of our activations, both Pride and other activations. And Tanya actually newly joined my team in June and jumped right in. So thank you to the team for activating all of these activations.
Great.
That's the overview of the footprint and just a few images of us in action.
And that was a great overview, but what it doesn't capture is you have to really be there to see the excitement of people, especially at State Fair, people taking selfies on the wall and at the sculpture and just really enjoying it and all the tour stops. And while it's important, like Shanique said, to have that balance between gated, capturing emails from a marketing purpose and then metrics, one of the goals for next year is how do we measure beyond just email capture? How do we, with surveys, we have to figure out different methodologies of tracking the effectiveness of this. But if someone walks through this experience and plays with the videos and just has a really great time and really thinks positive in New York, but doesn't leave an email, that's not a fail. So how do we capture that type of response? So that's one of the goals for next year. Great.
Shanique, I just have one question. Of the 12 places that you went, 3 were out of state. Which states did you go to?
Canada,
Okay.
New Jersey, and 2 in New Jersey.
Were there festivals there, or?
Yeah, so one was the 2 in New Jersey was the Balloon Festival and the New Jersey Fair, but it was in the Meadowlands, so the northern part of the state.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Shanique mentioned the I Love New York LGBTQ Pride activations, and that actually was a big part of our summer work as well, maximizing Pride Month. This was the first time that we've been back on the road since COVID, so we were thrilled to be out there, held activations in Buffalo, Albany, Rochester, Harlem, New York City, Fire Island, and Syracuse. We had a reimagined experience that Shanique and her team put together in consultation with myself and David Turley on the I Love New York team that featured an aura reading. I can't remember if I mentioned this at the last tech meeting, but the idea was that we had a actual guy who does for a living aura readings, reads the energy field around you, and he has special equipment that we took instant pictures of people. Then he read their aura there on the spot, and then matched them up with travel activities that matched their personality and their aura. People loved it. They were lined up for 45 minutes, an hour in some cases. And so it was really, obviously it's kind of a fun gimmicky way to get people interested. But when you're at these festivals and competing for people's attention, that's the sort of thing you have to do. And we saw it as a big success. That was just part of our LGBTQ promotion. We updated our website. We had new online and social media content promotion, Pride blogs, an updated LGBTQ travel guide, various social media posts. So it was basically throughout the season getting people out to Pride events, and then just great attractions throughout the summer as well. We also were at the State Fair for Pride Day. You've heard me say in prior meetings, we were the first state fair in the nation to have an official day celebrating the LGBTQ community. We're very proud of that. Others have copied us, so we can't say we're the only one anymore. That's great, but we're thrilled to be the first. So I Love New York, LGBTQ has been very involved with that every year. We took place in the flag raising ceremony in the morning. We were in the nightly parade. We were at their info fair, giving out information on travel all day. And this year, for the first time, we actually had a workshop in the Empire State Theater where we did 45 minutes on New York State for LGBTQ travelers. We also had the idea of that doesn't have to be just for LGBTQ. The day before on Thursday, we did one for the general public as well. So we were thrilled to have the opportunity to do that. And I guess I need to mention, I also had the honor of being the Grand Marshal of the Pride Parade at the fair that day, recognizing my role in launching I Love New York LGBTQ 9 years ago. I didn't have a tiara, but I had a lovely sash. It was terrific.
Well done.
Thank you. I actually arrived in New York City yesterday, not just for TAC, but we were thrilled to welcome Air New Zealand. Hopefully some of you have heard. Air New Zealand has just commenced its first inaugural nonstop flight from Auckland to JFK. This is significant not only to—
How many hours? 33.
15. It's 15-hour nonstop.
That's not so bad.
And
Really?
actually they
Generally 29 to Australia.
Yeah,
Maybe they're
well, now-
counting in a different way.
Well, now it's only going to be about 15. And so this means it's a really important opportunity for us, because it's not only about the folks in New Zealand, but primarily it's about the folks in Australia, that they, rather than flying through the West Coast, they will love this opportunity to transfer at New Zealand, which doesn't even have customs or whatever. They just walk a gate over. They don't have to touch their luggage from checking in at their airport in Australia, and then can end up at JFK, go through customs here and be here. So this is a really amazing opportunity for us. Barclay and I attended their inaugural events. There were 2 ceremonies last night, officiated by the Minister of Tourism for New Zealand and the CEO of Air New Zealand. The Prime Minister was actually supposed to be here. She had to be at the funeral in London today. She is arriving later today, though, to continue the promotion of this effort. So it's a really great thing. Air New Zealand, as part of this, invited key Australian and New Zealand media and tour operators to participate in familiarization tours. Today, they're out doing New York City. And then we were thrilled that our I Love New York Australia office was able to arrange for 9 tour operators to take a fam tour of the Hudson Valley and 5 international travel writers to the Long Island region. And in my discussions yesterday, there's a lot of excitement about this idea of adding on to New York City. The tour operators were telling me that a lot of Australians, will love coming to New York City and love there's an Australian word like hustle bustle, but it's like hurlable or something. Anyway, they'll love the hustle bustle of the city, but it can actually get overwhelming after a few days. And the idea of being able to go then to Long Island, the Hudson Valley, the Catskills, or elsewhere in New York State is going to be very appealing. And so we're thrilled our Australian office could do that. A lot of legwork from Danae Jones and our I Love New York team working on those FAM tours. And then thanks to our partners at Dutchess County Tourism, we also have TPAs from around the state coming from Buffalo, Ithaca, Cooperstown, Sullivan County, Orange County, Ulster, and they're going to be doing a network event at the FDR National Historic Site to present to the tour operators during a reception. So really a taste of New York State for all these folks who are coming. Also on the international front, Brand USA Travel Week takes place next week from September 26th to 29th. This is basically a trade show that Brand USA started just a couple of years ago to sell the US exclusively to Europe, as opposed to being part of a broader show which has the whole world competing for the attention of tour operators. And Mark Wilson will be representing us along with some of our international offices, be meeting with one-on-one key UK and European tour operators. Should be having close to 40 appointments over 3 days. So good luck, Mark Lee. Summer was also a busy time for funding, for New York State giving away money to partners to help support tourism. Kelly Beccarizzo and her team have been hard at work on what are now 4 different funding programs. Market New York, many of you have heard about in past years, the competitive program for for-profit and nonprofit organizations who have tourism projects, whether those be marketing or actually capital projects to improve tourism. Though the round 12 of those grants started on, the application started on May 2nd. The application process was closed on July 29th. And at that point, we found out that we had 146 applicants requesting over $34.5 million for what is a $15 million program. So more than double requested than what is available. That means we are now in the competitive scoring time. This is a match program. The capital match, the grantee puts in 80% and receives 20% of the state, but the marketing is 50-50. So basically a 1-for-1 match. It actually used to be the grantee only had to put in 25. This year it was made 50-50 to make it more consistent with the rest of our funding programs. And this year a particular emphasis was put on projects that align with what I Love New York is doing under our federal EDA tourism grant program. So folks who have projects that involved the MICE and the travel trade, international tourism, or outdoor recreation, those are being given specific attention. So that scoring process is on now, with announcements being made later in the year. Speaking of the EDA, you'll remember the $45 million we got from the federal government over the next 3 years to do funding programs, to do tourism programs. Part of that is we wanted to give away just over $14 million basically to our DMO and TPA partners statewide, so that they on a local level could amplify what we're doing on a state level in the MICE international and outdoor recreation work. So the deadline for those grants was August 23rd. We received requests for $29 million, again of 14.25 available. So again, a competitive process. We're currently scoring 33 eligible applications and hope to have announcements of those in the next couple of months. Our matching funds, you know, every county in New York State is eligible for tourism matching funds, a 1-for-1 match for their tourism work. Those guidelines literally went out this morning. So the TPAs are now aware of that program and start on their application materials and other paperwork so that money can start flowing to them early in 2023 for that program year. And then finally, the Meet in New York and Return to Work COVID relief programs. You remember the governor announced in November of, God, was it only last year? November of last year, feels like 2 years ago. We continue to receive applications for those programs. And we're going to be doing an additional round of outreach and promotion, especially because we are now have a person on staff specifically available who was hired over the summer to work on this project. And that way he can provide, Matthew Bishop is his name, can provide one-to-one counseling and help for folks in filling out the applications on this program and help oversee that outreach. So we'll continue working on that program. Rich alluded to that it's fall in New York. The first official day, Christine is absolutely correct, is this Thursday. But as far as New York is concerned, it is fall. The governor said so. She put out a press release last week announcing the first of our fall foliage reports, which went out on Wednesday, September 14th, with an all-new map, an updated report page on our website, an app that features a plethora of inspiring fall getaway content. You'll know that you'll remember from past years, these reports are compiled thanks to 85 leaf watchers across New York State, volunteers, some of which have been doing this for a couple of decades, get us their information. So that allows us to update this map and this report every Wednesday. It's an interactive foliage map, so it tracks the weekly changes of what's happening with the foliage, but also has recommended foliage locations for each location in the state, and also information on popular local and regional attractions. New this year, when you click on the map, you have an option to filter the types of attractions based on categories. So if you're particularly interested in food and drink or arts and culture, so that it's not only just attractions coming up, but whatever is of particular interest to the travelers. We're also inviting travelers to share their photos of foliage on our social media by using the hashtag NYLovesFall hashtag, and they have the chance of being featured in our fall foliage website and our official social media. Anna Packman, who heads up our digital, would also be very upset if I didn't mention that we have recently launched I Love New York TikTok account. So we can reach additional audiences, which adds to what we already had on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We're actually utilizing that for these fall foliage reports as well. And we'll give followers a new way to follow us during the fall season. Fall is also the time for Path Through History Weekend. We do one in spring, as you know, and one in fall. That's happening October 8th through the 10th, showcasing our state's historic and heritage travel sites by putting together a calendar of events that they host across the state. There are over 700 sites currently in Path Through History, divided into 14 different themes. And we already have a few dozen events registered for the middle of October there. Some of those include a Hide and Shriek Candlelight Ghost Tour in Cooperstown. The Roberson Museum and Science Center in Central New York is hosting exclusive guided tours of their Longhouse exhibit to honor Indigenous Peoples Day. In the capital Saratoga region, the Mayfield Historical Society's annual Fall Harvest Cruise-In is featuring spinning and rug braiding demonstrations in their loom room. And there's much more, so by all means go to the Path Through History website to hear all that's going on. We are also getting ready for Winter Media Night, believe it or not. We have to work a few months ahead of time, and that's coming up in October. Rowena Sohuli, who is ably pitching in, and while Lisa Soto is on maternity leave, is working diligently on that, co-hosting as we have in past years with the Olympic Regional Development Authority and the Ski Association of New York to highlight upcoming winter activities in New York State. The theme this year is A Winter's Tale, and we hope to feature activations that will highlight the FISU Games, the World University Games that Christine mentioned in Lake Placid, as well as other fun winter activities like skiing, curling, spa visits, ice wine tasting, et cetera, et cetera. And as usual, we'll have representatives from our TPAs across the state joining us for that. Last couple things. Christine alluded to the Nastia meeting coming up here in New York City, October 26th, 27th, and 28th at the New Yorker Hotel. We'll be doing our usual update to the industry. And then just as that is concluding, the New York International Travel Show is happening. Again, Danae Jones, who I was referring to, is working hard on that, October 28th through the 30th at the Javits Center. I Love New York is an official sponsor of that. We'll have a I Love New York branded aisle to gather about 20 of our partners from across New York State and make a real showing to consumers who are visiting that. That sponsorship also gives us a lot of exposure, not only during the show, but before the show, some ads, website presence. We'll also be co-sponsors of the press room there, and we'll be hosting an I Love New York press conference on their trade day, which is Friday. So the end of October is going to be pretty busy, and a lot of sort of this unofficial tourism week happening in New York State, which will be pretty exciting. And then the last thing I'll mention is that sort of sneak preview of the FISU Games, the World University Games in Lake Placid, coming this January. And that is the largest multi-sport winter event in the world after the Winter Olympics. So people, that sort of puts it in perspective for me. It will bring thousands of participants from across the globe to New York State. It's basically like, you know, somebody from the University of Berlin, I don't even know if there's such a place, paying somebody from Harvard, right? So it is kind of like the Olympics, except it is exclusively university athletes. And so in partnership with the Games, the Division of Tourism has been actively promoting updates such as ticket sales, which began earlier this month. And there'll be many more announcements happening. Our team will be working with the FISU teams to promote the Games and help spread the message. We may even have some more on that specifically at the next TAC. But that concludes my report.
Any questions for Ross?
I have a quick question for Ross. Hey, it's David Filipiak.
David.
Hi there. For the NYSTIA meeting and the awards in end of October, would you like or are you expecting any TAC members to be in attendance?
You're certainly welcome. That is an event that the New York State Tourism Industry Association holds for the industry. That includes everybody from DMOs to people who serve the tourism industry, media. So for people that, for example, sell advertising to people in tourism. So certainly anybody from TAC who would like to be a part of that meetings, there's registration information available online. Any other questions?
Okay. Well, Ross,
We can't hear you. Somebody's on
yeah,
911.
somebody has to
Somebody's
go
on the
mute.
phone.
Somebody who's driving, it sounds like. There we go. Thank you, whoever that was.
Good call.
Okay. Before we introduce our special guest speaker today, I noticed a few more TAC members joined us, so I do want to take note of that in attendance. I see Catherine Nichols has joined us. Thank you, Catherine. George and Tim has joined us. Thank you, George.
And I think it was representative.
And a representative from Senator Serrano's office. George, thank you. And Alexandra Stanton joined us. And anybody else, can you unmute and introduce yourself?
Eleanor Tatum, TAC.
Okay, Eleanor, thank you. Okay. Then we will move ahead with the introduction of Erica Sanger. Thank you so much, Erica, for joining us, the Executive Director of the Museum Association of New York State, to talk about what the association does and how we can help work closely together. I know museums are a huge, huge part of the tourism industry in New York State, and new museums are opening up all over the state. And in fact, in New York City, just last week, we opened up the Jackie Robinson Museum downtown on Varick Street. So in fact, baseball is on a lot of people's minds as Aaron Judge is about to possibly break another barrier here with a home run if he makes another. Now I don't mean to jinx it, but if he gets another two home runs.
The homestand all week, so hopefully it happens.
Yeah, it
where it's
happens
supposed to
while we're
happen.
here in New York, because then it will be extra special. But thank you so much, Erica, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Christine. I want to thank Ross and Sarah for the invitation to speak with you today and to share a little bit of what we do. I want to thank the members of the committee and Assembly Member O'Donnell and Senator Serrano's office for their support of museums. It really is essential from across the board. And I Love New York has been a partner of the Museum Association for many, many years. We were in Buffalo last week for the the American Association of State and Local History. I got to see the Colored Musicians Museum and all their plans, and the historic Michigan Street Corridor, which is absolutely blooming, and really exciting plans up ahead in Buffalo. So that was really great. So thank you. I think we can go next slide. So people say, how long have you been in museums? And that's my mom, pregnant with me, standing in front of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in June of 1962. So I've been in museums a long time. Next, please. Great. So the Museum Association serves the entire state. We have about 700 members, and of those 700 members, there's an additional 1,200 staff that are our members who we serve. We passed a new strategic plan and a brand new mission statement at our June board meeting, so you'll see some of that language change if you go to our website and our publication materials. If you go next, Sarah, please. Our offices are located in Troy, and if you've never been to Troy, please come visit. It is an absolutely fabulous city. The historic district is blooming. But we have members, next one, Sarah, from all regions and all disciplines across the state. In the last year, we saw a 4% increase of organizational members in New York City, which is some really nice growth that we like to see. But we are pretty much evenly represented across all of the economic development regions. Next. Our biggest program of the year is our annual conference. Our 2022 annual conference was in Corning. We maxed out the Corning Museum of Glass and the Rockwell Museum's COVID safety capacities at 300 people. I Love New York was well represented with David Turley came and spent a few days with us. When we talk about economic impact of the Museum Association's conference, we're looking at a $500,000 impact on the city of Corning for our conference. Next. We are supported by public and private, both industry sponsors as well as private foundations. This is our list from the website. I think I took that last week down. I think we added one more. Next. And when you look at museums across the state, no matter the size or the discipline, a zoo, an art museum, they're really all concerned with the same issues, right? There are resources, how to get human resources, how to get financial resources, relationships with their communities, visitors from outside the communities, which is, you know, what we are doing and partnering with you guys, and then how to create access to exhibitions and collections. And over the last 2.5 years, that access has really grown because of digital access. If we could go back one, I'm so sorry. I want to take a second, play a game. Take a look at the pictures, and if someone thinks that they could identify 6 of these places, raise your hands. I'm not going to ask if you can identify all of them. Can you identify 6? You get 5.
I get 4 for sure.
4 for sure. 4 for sure. Maybe 5. From upper left is the Everson Museum, Ganondigan State Historic Site, Hanford Mills, we figured was the hardest one. That's FDR's monument in Hyde Park. That's his burial place. New York Botanic Garden, Olana. In the middle on the right is the Wild Center, and bottom right, Museum of Natural History in New York City. I just thought we'd have some fun. Like, you know, like with Wordle and the National Gallery Corridor. So when we discuss museums and economic impact, there are 5 questions that I want to just have people keep in the back of their minds. How can efforts to grow museums and museums programs play into economic development efforts? Are there opportunities to boost performance in the museum sector that we might not be looking at, right? What types of programs or policies would support an increase in multiplier effects for museums? What benefits might come to local economies for more emphasis and perhaps more aggressive efforts to target visitors and tourists? And that's on the museums more aggressive. And then how can educators, community leaders, and public agencies intervene with museum industry partners? And when we say that, it could be everything from someone who is a vendor supplying food in a museum cafe to the person who's building the lighting systems, right? In ways that lead to cumulative improvements, both social and economic climates for museums. Okay. So the numbers that I'm going to be sharing with you were collected in 2016 and were aggregated in a 2017 report. These are the last numbers that we have to talk about tourism in our field and economic impact. So if you look on that chart, it shows that New York's museums have greater impact on New York State's economy than the economic impact of museums on any other state's economy, right? So if you think about California, if you think about Texas, right? Museums do more for New York than museums in Texas do for Texas, right? That's the comparison. Next. Yeah, that's just the older numbers. So this is why the Museum Study Act is so important, because when the governor signs this bill and we can actually do this study, it's going to give us the visitor statistics that I could not bring to you today because they don't exist on a museum by museum basis. So there are 3 numbers I want you to remember. And these, again, 2017 numbers: 61,000 jobs supported, $5.4 billion in economic impact, and $1.4 billion in tax revenue back to New York State. Next. So again, 2017 numbers using 2016 data. If we look at New York, which is on the right-hand side, national is on the left-hand side, New York's museums contribute more than 10% to the economic impact of museums on our nation's economy. Right? We hold 10% of the nation. Makes sense. Next. So when these numbers came out, we met with the staff of Senator Gillibrand's office, and we were very fortunate to have 2 staff members with us, one who carried the agricultural portfolio for New York State. And we said 5.37 billion. And he said, but wait a minute, that's the ag number. And we went, And so I went and did some research, right? Okay, if this is the ag number, where is this? So if you go to next. And I found 3 different sources from the Senate Agriculture Committee, from the Controller's Office, and from a Cornell University professor, showing that the museum economic impact is equal to the agricultural impact. If you go one more, we have a picture. So New York State is second in the nation in the number of museums. New York is second in the nation in the production of cottage cheese, apples, maple syrup, and wine. So that's your equation. Museums equal. Right. Next, please. We have spent a tremendous amount of time over the last 2.5 years supporting the field with COVID impact reports. And if anyone wants to drill deeper on some of these numbers, they're all up there. I just want, and I might have a slide coming up, but more PPP loans were given to museums in New York State than were given to all of museums in New England, right? So again, that shows the impact on the number of employees. You combine Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island equals the number of PPP loans that went to New York State alone. Next. So why were museums in such a vulnerable position when Governor Cuomo declared New York on pause? If you go back to 2019, more than 30% of New York State's museums were operating in a deficit position. So we entered the pandemic, 1 in 3 entered the pandemic in deficit. And you could see in some areas we're doing better, in other areas, central New York and western New York were in real trouble at the time. Next. So just some, COVID numbers, 75% had an average revenue loss of 34% year over year. Half reported losing staff. Who's reported losing staff? They lost over 1/3 of their staff. Some lost all of their staff, and they have not recovered yet. And the pandemic is making a real difference how museums work and serve their audiences. So, what do we need? We need general operating funding, right? We need post-pandemic strategies for survival. And how do we create pathways to financially healthier institutions? And I would say tourism is one of the ways tools we can use to create those pathways. Next, please. So pre-pandemic funding sources, you can see, this chart, and these were 200 museums from all over the state replied. The biggest source is private funding, but New York State funding was hitting about half the museums in the state pre-pandemic. And this is the rescue funding, right? It's a little complicated to see, but that big red amount on the bottom is Paycheck Protection Program. There was NEH funding, there were EIDL loans, other SBA loans, private funders, and the New York State Council on the Arts gave 4 museum rescue grants. Okay. So again, these questions, what do we do? How do we think about this? How can we leverage what's in front of us to make the field stronger in lots of ways? Next, please. So, as I'm sure this commission knows, because I think, Christine, you might be on the commission, or a representative will be on the commission. In 2021, the legislature passed the New York State 250 Commemoration Act. It was amended this past February. And once funds are appropriated by the legislature and raised by members of the commission, grants for programs and historic preservation are to be made available through the Office of the New York State Historian and New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. So we've been working very closely with the AASLH, who is sharing out information on this for a very long time. A private foundation in New York State, they're located in Syracuse, just gave $400,000 to this national organization to fund service to museums across the country. So we hope to be competitive in some way. Next, please. And so the Museum Association of New York, we are the New York State representative to the Smithsonian's Traveling Exhibition Program, the Museum on Main Street. About 3 years ago now, we saw this coming down the pike and we signed the contract with them. 12 museums in New York State will be able to host the Voices and Votes Democracy in America exhibition leading up to the semi-quincentennial, so that we will begin discussions and planning for this so that people will be ready by the time we hit America 250. This past week, we met with the National Endowment for Humanities, We met with America 250 folks. We've met with the Institute of Museum of Library Services and the American Alliance of Museums so that we can help get New York State museums prepared. Next, please. So coming up, we're super excited. Our 2023 annual conference will be in Syracuse, New York at the Historic Hotel Syracuse. I'm flying from here to Syracuse this afternoon to get ready for that. And we look forward to thinking about ways that we can work with I Love New York in Syracuse on this conference. And I think that's it. Any questions? I know that was a lot of numbers.
Great, it's a great presentation.
How many museum members, may I?
Yeah.
How many museum members?
Members, there are 700.
700 New York State museums that are members of your organization?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. And overall, it depends who you ask. We either have 1,400 or 2,500. Yeah.
Museums in New York State.
Yeah.
Oh, so there's room for growth.
There is room for growth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe at the conference in Syracuse
It
will get
always,
the message
it
out.
always,
Yeah.
yeah. We'll keep, you know. It's, we know of other state museum associations that lost support during the pandemic. So the fact that we've been able to maintain in the pandemic is an achievement for us. Yeah.
Yeah, Erica will remember that, you know, when I Love New York started working with Manny, one of the, I think, biggest values was getting tourism folks to speak museum and getting museum folks to speak tourism. That there were communities that didn't necessarily understand each other. And I got to tell my Greg Marshall story, which when Greg told me that when he first started working in tourism, he went to a museum very enthusiastically nearby and said, I'm here, I'm going to bring you all kinds of visitors, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And the museum curator said, well, thank you, Mr. Marshall. We're very excited that you're here. I want to let you know that my job is to make sure that that rug you're standing on that was made 200 years ago is here 200 years from now. And Greg said humbly, let me start over. And I tell that story all the time because I think it's a great example of we have so much shared interest and shared goals, and yet individual things to do as well. And to find those areas of overlap is so valuable.
Absolutely. Other questions?
David has his hand
David?
raised.
Hi there. Yes. I have a question. Are those 700 members, are any of them from private, virtual, or for-profit museums?
Yeah, a couple of them are from private. Stickley Museum comes to mind right away. There are also a couple of private archives. So yes, absolutely, private museums.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Catherine Nichols from the phone. Could I make a comment?
Of course, Catherine.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Erica. Representing the TAC committee, but also the New York State Council on the Arts. And we are awaiting any day now the opening of our portal for the 2023 capital appropriation, which is very exciting and the largest that NYSCA has received in history. It's scheduled to be $50 million, which of course museums will be eligible for. So very exciting. And the announcement and the portal opening with guidelines for this year's opportunities will be likely in the next days to a couple of weeks. So please stay tuned. And it's just a wonderful and exciting opportunity this year, the greatest amount in history at $50 million proposed.
Yeah, that's essential. More than 70% of our museums are in historic structures, not in purpose-built spaces. So capital needs for museums are real. And we are so grateful for NYSCA support of capital improvements in museums.
Yes, so we should coordinate and make sure that as soon as that opportunity goes out, you can help us get the word out to all of the members because it truly is an historic appropriation this year.
Yep, absolutely. It's on our radar. We've been waiting. We've been waiting.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Great.
Well, Erica, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
and informing us. Sarah, I assume this is going to be distributed to our TAC members, the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. So we
already
can,
have it.
we
Yep.
can look at that
Fabulous.
some more. And if we have any further questions, we will be in touch
Yes,
with you.
please feel free.
Sure. I will, I find it interesting, the $5.4 billion being both ag and museums,
Yeah.
right? Tied together.
Yeah.
One is food for the body and one is food for the mind.
Yes, yeah.
And also, I do want to just remind everyone that when the governor, she wanted to make a big deal about getting vaccinated. She went to the American
Yes,
Museum of Natural History here in New York City and got vaxxed under the great big whale. So I stood up.
And Assembly Member O'Donnell, we pushed out a letter a couple of weeks ago encouraging museums to be polling places across the state, because I believe the Metropolitan Museum of Art was the first museum to be a polling place. And we think it's a really natural partnership. Another way that we can work with the communities. So yeah, we're reaching out as we can when, yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea. Well, terrific.
Thank you.
I want to open it up to new business. And I know we have another museum here as a guest, Journey. So Greg, if you want to make an introduction or.
Well, I did want to say a couple things, and I do want to yield to Journey because I'm so excited that I had a little bit of a role in having her here. I've been around a long time. Anybody listening on the telephone or at this table, I've said this before in October of 2019, and I'm going to say it again, including those who are on maternity leave. There has never, since the inception of the I Love New York program, been a better New York ESD team in place than there is now. The programs, the staff professionalism, the reactiveness, the resourcefulness is as solid as I've ever seen it in all of those years. So thank you very much. And that's not patronizing you. It's not kissing butt. I earnestly believe that. I don't say things that I don't believe. I'm so, I have a company called Genesee Journeys. Part of its representation, part of its inbound international, but I'm here for Wine, Water, and Wonders. We are so proud that that organization, that fledgling organization, is largely in place because of I Love New York and the work we did with you early on is made it through the pandemic. Not only did we make it through the pandemic, we're financially sound. Delta Airlines has been a great partner. We have 12 partners, 6 in the pipeline, and we feel we play an important role bringing fledgling partners into the international inbound business. I'm so proud that they've asked me to be in Frankfurt for the Brand USA Week. I'll be there with Markley. I'm very excited. Let me just stop there and say thank you for letting me come to this, or any of us that aren't part of it. But Journey Gunderson, who is the executive director of the National Comedy Center, which I have a fledgling relationship with, I would yield my time. That's an appropriate phrase.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for having me. Thank you for that presentation. That was fascinating. And a lot of what I want to update everyone on has a lot to do with everything everyone has reported on. So many of you know that Empire State Development and I Love New York were instrumental in even getting the National Comedy Center built in New York State and in Lucille Ball's hometown of Jamestown, New York. So we wouldn't exist were it not for ESD. And it's been a crazy timeline, of course, opening in 2018 before a pandemic. But I just want to, and I'll be brief, highlight what has happened this year, because I think it plays into a lot of the strategy of New York State as a whole in terms of attracting more people. We're just coming off of about 3 weeks ago being named to US News and World Report's list of top 25 family weekend getaways. So on that list is Disney World, Disneyland, New York City, Hawaii, and now the National Comedy Center in Jamestown. So we're thrilled with that. And that's coming off of a summer where we launched 2 major exhibitions. One is the Johnny Carson Experience, hosted by our hologram host, Jimmy Fallon. So we shot that here in New York with Jimmy in the spring. And it's immersive, much like you've seen the Van Gogh exhibition traveling the country. So you really are enveloped in the story of 30 years of late night, 30 years later, the story of Johnny Carson. We just cut the ribbon on that a month ago. We also had a really special experience celebrating our founding advisory board member, Carl Reiner. Rob Reiner and 17 members of the Reiner family came to town to cut the ribbon on the exhibit. And CBS Sunday Morning ended up deciding to come and cover that and interview the 3 children of Carl Reiner in the National Comedy Center Museum galleries. They also filmed the stage celebration we did with the family in front that was hosted at our partner cultural institution, Chautauqua Institution. So we're located on Chautauqua Lake, and it's 4,000 seat amphitheater. So we don't have an air date yet, but CBS Sunday Morning covering that tour was important for us. We saw the return of the Lucille Ball Comedy Festival. So we had been on a hiatus due to the pandemic. And when you're talking about zip codes, one thing that always amazes me is here we are in this corner of southwestern New York. Every single year at the Lucille Ball Comedy Festival, we get zip codes from over 40 US states in Jamestown, New York, over the course of 3 days. So this is something that really has reach and draws people from far and wide. We had Margaret Cho, Jeff Foxworthy, David Spade, Kevin Nealon. It was an incredible lineup. We also had a big year from the perspective of the brand of Lucille Ball. We've been putting so much energy into the fact that it was her vision, and we built the National Comedy Center and started getting the word out. No, this is not a giant Lucille Ball museum. This is about all of comedy. And it was designated by the United States Congress shortly after our opening, if you don't know, as the nation's official cultural institution dedicated to comedy. But this year, we saw Lucille Ball take center stage with Amy Poehler doing her documentary for Amazon, Lucy and Desi, and the Aaron Sorkin film Being the Ricardos. And so if you watched any of the Emmys or knew the categories that weren't televised, Amy Poehler just won an Emmy for her documentary, Lucy and Desi. She spent a week in Jamestown and worked heavily with our team, sourcing so much of the subject matter for that. I was interviewed for it, our director of archives. We also supported Judd Apatow in his George Carlin documentary because we're the home of the 25,000 piece George Carlin archive. So he won an Emmy. So we're supporting 2 projects that have won Emmys just recently. We hosted a creative retreat featuring the chief creative officer of Pixar. So Pete Docter, who recently won the Oscar for Soul and is responsible for Toy Story and so many other things. He's on our advisory board. He'd never been to the Comedy Center, right? So you, as Rob Reiner put it, you really have to want to go there. But what's interesting is the National Comedy Center transcending just being a museum attraction and becoming a destination for retreats and conferences. We hosted Nistea last year. Its proximity to Lake Chautauqua makes it an ideal destination for corporate gatherings and educational experiences within the walls, but using comedy in all the ways that it relates to the businesses that everybody can kind of put that into place. The last thing I kind of wanted to highlight, which is incredible that we've been anointed the bricks and mortar home of it, is the Hall. So Netflix just aired in May a new special called The Hall, honoring the greats of stand-up, and we have been designated as the permanent bricks and mortar home. But what this does in terms of this room and the people here and what we do, it allows New York State to leverage national brands. So now we are the home of the hall that will celebrate just in its inaugural year, Robin Williams, Richard Pryor, George Carlin, Joan Rivers. Those were the inaugural inductees, inducted by Dave Chappelle, Jon Stewart, John Mulaney, and Chelsea Handler. So annually, we as a museum in Jamestown, New York, and New York State will get 4 more inductees to sort of leverage. And the reason I put it in those terms, our VP of marketing comes from Graceland. And so he's kind of saying, Lucille Ball, Jamestown, like Elvis is to Graceland, becoming the home of the Hall has such power when it comes to New York State and attracting people. So anyway, it's been a busy year. We had a lot going on, and I think it's a key moment to come back and sort of update Empire State Development on our trajectory since we opened, but also the future. I mean, this thing is, you may know, and I'll close here, in addition to the U.S. News and World Report distinction, throughout the time between 2018 and now, we acquired accolades including Time Magazine's World's Greatest Places, the best new museum in the country, USA Today, and Condé Nast Traveler called us at our opening one of the best museums in the country, period. So the irony of some of that is, you mentioned being down, I think, 16% in tourism this year. You mentioned the need for capital support and operations support. Well, these things sound wonderful. We're still a lean nonprofit dealing with the aftermath of a pandemic and being a fledgling institution that's in its critical launch phase. So every week still feels like a struggle, like we're really needing to make this thing soar. So that's where we are, but we're coming at this from a position of strength and happy to be here with you all. So thanks for all the support you've given us.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Journey. That was terrific. I have one question. Are you a member of Manny?
Yes, we are. I believe we are.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pending.
I know your logo is on my desk, so I'm like, I think you're a big member, but if we're not, that's my fault.
Eric,
Don't
I'm trying. Well, I think there's great collaboration opportunity there,
Absolutely.
and we wish you continued success. I know, especially coming out of the pandemic, it's a great time to be able to come together and join in laughter. We could use it now more than ever, right?
That's
So
right.
what you're doing is allowing us to have fun, and the fact that it's in New York State is terrific. I'll also just put on your radar and everybody's radar that the New York City Comedy Festival is going to be taking place. This is the 18th running of it, and it'll be November 3rd through the 13th, I believe. And it's going to be in all 5 boroughs this year. In fact, it's also going to go out to Long Island for the first time at UBS Arena. So if there's a collaboration there for upstate, downstate, I'm happy to connect you guys.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
I want to ask the members if any other new business that they have or want to share.
Hi. Tough act to follow. I'll try to be brief. So we've been having our events in New York State for multiple years. Travel Unity, nonprofit focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. This March, we had our first event outside of New York in Brookhaven, Georgia. So our event in the Finger Lakes in Cayuga County, in Auburn in December, is now our Northeast Summit. And that is not just a name. We are not just going to have New York folks. We have the head of Visit Portland in Maine, Discover Newport, Greater Boston CBB should be there as well. So it's truly going to be a Northeast tourism and diversity, equity, and inclusion event. Wednesday evening, afternoon, we're going to have Wednesday, December 6th or 7th rather. We're going to have a discussion about Finger Lakes, tourism, DEI. Then the 8th and 9th are the main days of that. And 2 years ago, we put out DEI standards for travel and tourism for visitor-facing organizations, publicly available. By the end of this year, we're going to have DEI standards for special events and sports, also publicly available. How a conference, festival, sporting event can, from the get-go, from its foundation or kind of tearing it apart, how do you include DEI when you're running an event? So that's something we're working on now. Thank you.
Coming next spring.
Sorry. The DEI standards, we're working, by the end of the year, they'll be out. So looking for feedback from folks over the next few weeks and months, including some of our college partners, work with different universities around the country. So.
Thanks, Ronnie. When you have those up, just if you want to share them we can then send them out as well.
Thank you.
Do you want to say something?
No, I was just saying thanks.
Oh, okay. All right, terrific. I know George and Tim has his hand up. George?
Yes, Christine. No, I just have a quick comment to make. Last week, the Roberto Clemente family came to New York City to be recognized by the New York Mets. As you may know, it's been 50 years since he passed, and they were, highly recognized at the New York Mets game during the Mets and Pittsburgh Pirates game. And Friday, they also hosted a gala at the Marquee, and it was a great success. Now, it looks as if they were not really recognized by the city or the state very well. So I was wondering if there's anything that TAC can facilitate or do to maybe have the city or the state recognize them, whether it be maybe a street naming or, naming after, I don't know, but I just wanted to throw it out there and get your opinion. Thank you.
Well, we have two amazing representatives from the state on our committee. So maybe, George, after this, we can connect and see what can be done. And then as from the city's perspective, I think the Mets, they have a very good contact with the city, and I think I would suggest working through the Mets to the city. That might be the best way.
Okay. All right.
George, did you want to add something? George Demolis?
No, I mean, that's an interesting concept in our offices. You know, we've done things in the past. So that is something that, you know, our office can look into as well.
Hi, this is Eleanor. This is Eleanor Tatum. I know that there are several places in the city already named after Roberto Clemente. There's the Roberto Clemente pool in the Bronx. And I believe there's also a Roberto Clemente park. I'm not sure if there are other places as well.
Thanks, Eleanor. In fact, Shanique is explaining to us that the pool is
The pool and
in
the
the
park
Bronx,
are in
and
the
the
same,
park
I grew
are
up right
state
behind
parks.
it. Yeah, they're both state. The pool sits within the state park facility.
Right. And then with the street, and also with street namings, that's on the community board level. The community boards are the ones that do the street namings, and they're voted on by community boards. And so there's a process of applying for a street to be named after a person, and then the community board votes on it.
Okay, how about maybe passing a resolution saying that Roberto Clemente Day, something like that?
I think there may be. I thought there was one. But let's just check. I thought there was one years ago, Georgia, if I recall. But I think the Mets would have the most up-to-date current information on how they deal within the city. But from a state perspective, George Demolis will ask you to help us out with that. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I can put my email in the chat as well. Feel free to contact me.
Yeah, George, I was looking at more from the state versus the city, you know, and if TAC wants to do something, I don't want us to go through the Mets, you know, because we can do our own thing, you know, just to recognize the organization. Yeah.
Yeah, I will add my email so you can we can discuss further.
Okay, thank you.
You got it.
Thanks so much, George.
Of
George
course.
and George, thank you. Okay, it's past 12:30, but I do want to give anybody last chat if anybody has anything else they need to add.
I actually just want to give a thank you to Sarah Hammer. She was up at 3:30 this morning to be here, again pitching in for Kelly Garofalo Wilkins on maternity leave. We actually have 4 team members on parental leave right now, so we've been
more coming.
Yeah, and more coming. I don't know what's in
Sarah's a new mom,
I don't know what's in the water
Some
over
come
here.
back, some go out.
But thank you, Sarah, for all the work to have the meeting work well.
And Christine, I just wanted to add one more thing. You know, when I was listening to the conversation earlier about the museums, you know, one of the things that we may want to think about, and the museums may want to think about and find out if there is funding for, is during times when there is extreme heat or extreme cold, using cultural institutions as warming centers and cooling centers.
I think that that's something that we can certainly talk about. There's a lot of buzz around the museum community about responses to climate change. And I know that museums are called energy sinks because we take so much energy to protect our collections, but it also means that the buildings are constantly at one temperature, so that if there are ways that we can't figure out how to open our doors in times like that, I think it's a great idea.
And also, it would just possibly bring in populations that may not usually come to the museum. And so, with a look through a DEI lens, it could be something that could be really great for some underserved populations and for new populations of museum visitors.
Yes.
Interesting. Interesting. Ellie, thanks so much for the suggestion. Okay. I wanted to let you know that our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, November 14th at 11 a.m. Most likely here, but if that changes, we will let you know. And I need a motion to adjourn.
And a suggestion not to hold this during General Assembly again. I think we said last year that we would try not to do it during the GA.
Yeah, the challenge with that is they don't, believe it or not, announce a year ahead of time. And so when we do our meeting notices in December, we did our best. We did the research, but clearly didn't succeed. But we'll try again.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a motion from David and I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ellie. Okay. All in favor? I'm sure everybody is to get on. So motion is adjourned and it is, I have to tell the time, it is 12:40. Thank you all very much.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Christine. Thanks for us.
Take care.